David, you have been covering foreign affairs for a long, long time. I want your reaction 6 hours after watching what you saw in the White House, but I want to understand, how did you feel watching it in the moment? What went through your mind?
Shock. It was extraordinary, unprecedented. And it was a role reversal in that you have an American president. Normally the American president is like defending the democracy, the nascent democracy, this young president of Ukraine. And as you know, the danger is the autocrat, often Russia. So it was this sort of stunning role reversal, and it just amazed me. But the tone was what was so unusual. And one last thing, I'm not surprised by the way Trump acted. In this book I wrote about the Justice Department, I heard about a lot of private meetings with Trump and people from the Justice Department. He berated them. He lectured them. He was angry and vengeful and sort of had a chip on his shoulder. And he sort of, facts didn't matter, and, Justice Department norms didn't matter. And so when I saw it unfold, it was remarkable to see, the Donald Trump in private shown to the world.
But it's not just about not respecting the norms. It's lack of decency. If we don't treat one another with decency, with respect, we have nothing. For you, you have spent an enormous amount of time in the White House. You've worked in a White House. Watching a confrontation like that, what was your reaction?
Oh, my God, it made me wince. I almost felt like I wanted to apologize on behalf of America to Ukraine, to President Zelensky, and frankly, to the world, because it's not who we are and it's not how we do things.
But now, hold on. Isn't it, though? Like, we keep saying this isn't who we are. But the United States knew exactly who Donald Trump was, and they elected him again. And to David's last point, this is exactly who Donald Trump is. So are we fooling ourselves when we keep saying this isn't who we are?
That's fair. I mean, international relations typically and foreign policy is conducted in this traditional way. And Trump broke all that, and people wanted, the majority of Americans wanted him to break all that. The thing is, I've been in my fair share of these meetings behind closed doors where I have seen U.S. officials argue with foreign officials to the point where it gets ugly, it gets heated, and people will walk out. Never at the presidential level, but often at levels that are only a little bit lower. It happens all the time, but it's usually behind closed doors. And the difference with when you have it out in the open is that it makes it very difficult to move forward, because now somebody has to give a public apology. Now that everybody's going to ask. Now, then it's going to make Zelensky look like he's groveling. And the only person who wins in this whole exchange is Putin. Putin's the one sitting there watching, drumming his little fingers, laughing, thinking, this is exactly what I had hoped for. But the part that got me the most upset is that there is a lack of understanding that this is in America's national security interests. Supporting Ukraine is in our interests. It's not a charitable giving to Ukraine.
Can you remind our audience why?
Because if we allow, first, one of the things I like to say is that supporting Ukraine is the best deal of the century. Why? Because we are funding a military that is very capable, that soaks up that training and whatever we give, and is very capable, very creative in pushing back on a dictator that wants to completely undo the international world order that has been set up since World War II. He is fighting, and Ukraine is fighting. All of these people are fighting, not just because they don't want to be under dictatorship, but they're fighting for democracy for themselves and for the rest of the Western world. And we don't have to put one troop down on that territory. We just have to help them do it for us, for all of us. And that's why I say it's the greatest deal of the century. If we allow Putin if there's a deal and Putin can go and rebuild and resupply and get what's he going to do? He's going to move on to Georgia or Moldova or do it again in Ukraine. He's not going to learn his lesson. History has proven that time and again, and Putin has proven that time and again. And that's why it's so important. This is in our interest just as much as it is in Ukraine.
That is such an important explanation. Molly, it's not just decency that's required with diplomacy. It's finesse, it's sophistication, and it's honesty. So I want to go back to a bit that you heard J.D. Vance kind of harping on, arguing that Volodymyr Zelensky never said thank you.
Right.
So let's just share a bit and fact check that.
I thank every American family. I thank President Biden and both parties.
I'm very thankful to American people.
Thanks you, your team, Congress.
I'd like to thank America and our partners for the support.
And I'm very grateful to all Americans.
We deeply appreciate that Ukraine and America have stood side by side. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for invitation. So thank you very much.
That's the first thing he said today. Thank you very much. I was going to ask you to do a shot of vodka every time you heard thank you, but you'd be passed out before the show was over. What was the point of that? Because I can guarantee all over right-wing media we're hearing tonight, of course they should have beat him up hard. Do you know how many billions of dollars we've given? Not given, and we haven't gotten so much as a thank you in response. That's simply not true.
Well, this phenomenon in Trump 2.0 that we see where people like Vance and Elon try to out-Trump Trump. And we keep seeing it, where sort of they're trying to be even Trumpier. But I thought what was interesting was the moment where the negotiation really broke down was that Zelensky didn't trust taking Trump at his word, right? Like the whole deal is that America will protect Ukraine for these minerals, right? That's the deal. And the problem is, like, if you look back at Trump 1.0, it's hard to imagine that this guy, that you should just take him at his word. And I think ultimately that was sort of the sticking point. It fell apart, but it really fell apart because Zelensky wanted more assurances about security.
Steve, I'm coming to you, but David, I need you to help us now. Tell us what happens next, like short and long term for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky is on the plane headed home. Now what?
I think, Trump will cut off all aid. And Putin, this actually just decreases the chances of any kind of peace agreement because Trump will so aggressively back Russia and so aggressively
and they're going to
abandon
pretend that
Ukraine.
Today was this big battle royale, but it was really just a show that didn't need to happen.
He wanted the security guarantees. That was the problem. I mean, we don't know what happened beforehand and whether it was the same mineral deal.
I watched this like the fix was on.
You used to live in Russia.
I used to live in Russia. I covered summits, and they go in there. They know what they're going to say. They meet behind closed doors. Sometimes they argue, like you said, and they come out all smiles. It's all choreographed really well. I went to Helsinki to cover a couple summits there. I think the fix was on this one. I think look, if they didn't want this to happen, it's terrible.
Hold on, they being whom?
Vance and Trump wanted to walk away. They want to walk away from Ukraine. That's what they want to have happen.
But if you look at Trump 1.0, you've never seen things like this that were orchestrated so successfully.
Because Molly, he wasn't surrounded by enablers, right? He didn't go into, today wasn't on his own. He had JD primed with not just backup punches, but he's his co-pilot.
And I think the reason, Steph, is because some Republicans backed them into doing this deal. I don't think he wanted to do this minerals deal. I don't think he wants to be backing up Ukraine. He's so angry about Zelensky from the first impeachment thing. Yeah. He's angry about the Russia thing. Now, the alternative to all of this is that American diplomacy and our foreign policy is based upon the absence of a thank you. If that's true, of course, there's that scene at the end of one of the Godfathers where he comes in and says, "You disrespect me on the day of my daughter's wedding," which that seemed a little bit like that to me. But I don't think that's the case. I think he has long wanted out of this Ukraine thing. He doesn't want to do it. Now, the thing, David, the alternative that Steph asked you.
He wanted that for a long time, so he put on this show so his supporters would think Zelensky deserves it.
And
he came to the White House and didn't respect our man.
And now Ukraine falls, and I don't think the president cares about that. And I think that if not, the Europeans step in, and I think the president wins on that one, too.
Yeah.
Am I wrong about that, David?
I don't. He wins in the short term, sure, but you've got an image of Kyiv falling to Russian tanks, which is like Kabul falling to the Taliban.
It is, but we've reached a point where all sorts of American people are saying, Kyiv, not my problem, not realizing what it actually means long term.
That's true, and that's the sort of brilliant messaging here. I mean, I give Zelensky credit. I think they didn't offer him security guarantees, and he had the guts in the Oval Office to push back.
Yeah.
And to say,
because he is worried he can't trust him. But the question is, you had two European leaders earlier in the week go in there and try to manipulate Trump into loving them. And it seemed, and again, it's Trump, so we don't know if it will continue this way, but that seemed to have worked really well. So the question is, did he come to this already with a plan? I just have trouble He's
seeing
not
that
a
kind
planner.
of forethought on the
Right.
He's not,
yeah.
but he now has an administration
Right.
that's all on board for this, as opposed to the last time around where Jim Mattis and H.R. McMaster weren't masterminding this. They were saying absolutely not. So you're France.
And one other thing, Steph,
Yes,
which is that as this
please.
thing was going downhill, J.D. Vance was happy to push it.
Right.
Yes, Oh, sure
Right?
was.
He did not
Very-
step back.
yes.
Mark Rubio didn't say a thing. J.D. Vance didn't help us.
He was very
didn't help the
performative.
situation.
It almost felt contrived, and he was provoking Zelensky. I don't think we
Well,
can.
he was getting Donald
yeah.
Trump's approval. Donald
Right.
Trump
Yes.
called him in,
Yes.
saying,
He
you're
wanted
going to do
daddy's
the beat
approval.
up.
And
Yes.
Marco said nothing.
And I don't.
Nothing. Hold on one second, David.
And it's just, again, it's this, like it or not, this sort of brilliant messaging. You haven't thanked us. And it's not
Which
even
is a
close
lie.
to true. It's a
Right.
lie. I know it's a lie. We'll talk more about lies and the deficit and all this stuff. But it's Trumpism.
Right.
Tell this whopping lie. It's a really dramatic narrative. How can this insolent little country do this in the Oval Office?
Hold on, Hagar.
Okay.
I don't think we can underestimate how much Trump doesn't like Zelensky.
Right.
And he's not a forgiving guy, and we've seen that over and over again.
You think?
Yeah, right. And the fact is that in 2019, he wanted Zelensky to reopen this investigation to Hunter Biden and look into servers for Hillary Clinton's emails. And Zelensky said no. And then it came out into the public, and it causes impeachment. And this, to me, felt a little bit like this vindictive retribution.